And we are broadcasting once again with insanity across the interwebs. I am Eric here with. I will give you I don't want to call it a privilege because that would be condescending. I will give you the respect of referring to you in feminine pronouns. So that might not seem very gratuitous to you, but to me, I don't normally do that. But I have Miss Melina here, or Ms. Would you prefer that? I don't know.
Either way is fine.
Okay.
But thank you.
Just to be clear from the very start, I'm not looking to be condescending. I'm not looking to be abusive. I'm not looking to be badgering or just like finger pointing or anything. I want to have a good, honest conversation about our individual interests and how they collide. Me as a cis white male, you as a, well, I'll let you describe yourself. How would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello. I am Melina. I'm a trans woman. I've been transitioning for really only a few months this time, but it's not my first time trying. I tried to transition about 8 years ago, and I couldn't find a way to do it at the time. So I gave up on it for a while and did my best to muddle through life as a guy and had marginal success. And here I am today making another go of it.
And what inspired you to make this move?
Um, that's truly a very complicated question. I don't mind answering, but I'll have to be brief. I found myself in a situation where I was looking heavily at where I was and where I wanted to go, and I needed to make several major changes in my life if I wanted to have a life worth living, and this was among the things that I really wanted. So it made sense, and a lot of pieces fit together that did not fit together the first time. So it made sense, and so much of my life is so much better as a result of it. It's great.
So, I mean, you've already begun answering this question, but how has your life been since you begun the transition?
Um, it's been really wonderful. I've met and formed friendships that I never would have found before. I've made more friends than I ever thought that I could make. As a result of this, I'm more open. I'm able to experience the vibrancy of life and really enjoy it rather than just see it and see other people and say, oh, that's nice. I could feel that.
Well, I'm very happy for you. I'm glad. You know, one of the hardest things in life is, especially when we're not given a really good, solid ground from which to start. One of the most rare things in life is finding a place where you feel like you really belong. And this is where I really identify with trans people in general. When you find that niche for yourself, all the power to you. That is so rare in life and is such a precious gift. And I couldn't be anything but happy for you. Now, having said that, would you like to recap what brought us to this conversation? What was our introduction?
um, well, we met on a topic that a mutual friend had commented on, and
Was it in
then
Whitney Much? Wasn't your mutual friend
yes, it
Whitney?
was.
I
Yes,
really
it
like
was
her, by the way.
actually.
It's like I really want to hate her because she represents everything I stand against in so many ways, but she's such a
Mhm.
gracious, kind person, and she has integrity. I love the shit out of her. So we should
She's a
be enemies,
wonderful
but for some
woman.
reason we're not. Yeah, she's cool.
She is, and I have the pleasure of actually knowing her in person rather than over the internet. So
Oh,
she's
nice.
helped me out before, actually. So it's really nice.
One of these
But
days I'll get her on for a broadcast.
maybe, maybe I
So
don't
go
know.
on
You'll
with
have
what
to
you were
talk to
saying.
her about that.
Yeah.
Right. So we were talking about transgender people wanting to use the appropriate bathrooms and the pushback against it. I don't specifically remember if it was about HB2 or not. Excuse me. Um, and we went into it a little bit, and then you suggested this as a way to broaden the exchange, make it a bit easier on both of us, and I did actually appreciate that. So, because it is very nuanced, and it's sometimes hard to do in the typing format unless you're looking at an entire paper. So.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, Facebook comments are so brief, and they really do lack inflection. So I think it really does. Um, it adds fuel to the fire to be able to read into things, but it really reconciles things to be able to look a person in the eye, to hear the inflection in their voice, and to really engage one another on a human level, to recognize that we're not just talking about theoretical propositions, but we're talking about real life experiences here, and that's valid.
Absolutely, it helps to put a face to the issues and the people that are affected by it. And that's
Mhm.
something that we, trans women in particular, but the entire transgender populace have a problem with, in that so many of us try so hard to be under the radar in the first place because of all the problems we experience. It's to our advantage to remain hidden. But then because we're hidden, those that can't end up having much bigger problems. So that's why I've personally chosen to not be hidden, even if I could be.
So, I mean, maybe I'm jumping the gun a little bit here because there's a lot of ground I wanted to cover before I actually got to this, but I'll just put the question to you. Do you really feel as though there's a definitive social solution to these various dilemmas that we face, given our identity crises? I mean, I'm not saying that, first and foremost, I'm not judging you at all. You have your life, I have mine. I've been crafted both by genetics and by the environment around me to give me a particular inclination, and I give you the same credit, recognizing that if I had lived your life, I can't say that I wouldn't make the exact same choices as you. Maybe you've made better choices than I would have made. Um, Having said that, how do we find a definitive solution to make all of these problems vanish? Maybe a better way to say it is it realistic to think that there's absolutely a way to eliminate these conflicts in our daily Congress?
Well, in terms of the general public sphere, it really comes down to acceptance. Acceptance that trans people are people, that trans women are women, trans men are men, those that are gender fluid, and gender variant, non-conforming, questioning, queer, all the entire spectrum. All of it exists, and they're all people, and they're all equally valid to live and be happy and go about their lives without persecution, bigotry, harassment, assaults, and murder.
I would agree with 90% of what you just said. Um, the difference that I would have is that a person's individual reality is not incumbent upon anyone else. What I mean by that, you have a right to view yourself however you want. However, I also have the right to view you however I want. Now,
Mm-hmm.
if I want to totally disregard you, totally relegate you to irrelevance, and just treat you like dirt, that would be really douchey of me. And there should be social consequences for that. However, in a civilized society, that needs to be allowed legislatively, administratively. You know what I'm saying? People have a right to be a dick. That doesn't mean it's cool. It doesn't mean it's okay. It does mean that it's their right, and we have a right to respond in kind by castigating them, ostracizing them, whatever. But I think it's very, very important that we retain the right to be an asshole.
On an individual level, there may be something to that. The problem comes in when it's an overwhelming majority of people that want to do this on a systemic basis, and it really, really hurts people.
Disenfranchisement, right?
In part, that could be. I haven't
Now,
thought of that term yet, but
now
yeah.
I have a very different worldview than most people, where I don't see things from the top down. I see things from the bottom up. And how this works out in my individual life, if you were in a bathroom, in a men's room, and some dude started intimidating you, I would stand up for you. I would be like, hey, what the fuck's your problem? Leave him, her, uh, whatever the pronoun is. Leave them alone. Let the person be who they're not fucking with you. They're not bothering with you. Just leave them alone. I would stand up for that. I don't believe in bullying. I'm a firm advocate of the non-aggression principle. But that's because I make that choice. And I'm free to make that choice because our society is libertarian enough to allow me that choice. It seems that we're moving in a direction where it's becoming less and less of a choice and more of a mandate. And the problem with mandating morality is that when people are forced to be good, no one ends up actually making the choice to actually be good.
That may be, but that's a problem I'm generally not concerned with. I'm far more concerned with preventing the bullying in the first place. If somebody wants to be a bully, that's different from actually being a bully. You know, when there are people that are going and storming into the bathrooms and beating us up and pulling us out and beating on us and raping us and stuff like that, that's a problem.
Absolutely.
Period.
Right.
And
And
when
we have laws
those
to
are
address
the
this.
issues, I have to fight.
Absolutely, and I think that oftentimes, and this is where this does relate to race relations, because oftentimes it's very similar to racism in police enforcement, where they don't see it as such a problem when a queer gets beat up, and I
Right.
think that's awful. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's absolutely deplorable. Now, I want to make it clear, I don't believe in the label of hate crimes. I think that's absolutely ridiculous. I think murder is murder, abuse is abuse, one way or the other. No one's death, no one's abuse is worth more than another's. If someone victimizes another person, they need to be dealt with, and that's all there is to it. The whole hate crime thing, I understand that it's seeking to find a balance, trying to offset how awful things have been in the past. But
Mm-hmm.
I just see it going down a very wrong road where it unbalances it on the other side. And
And
oh,
while
go ahead, go ahead.
while that is a legitimate concern, I think that's something best left to discuss once we actually get to that point. Because part of the problem there is when you start with a biased system, if you only go for equality, it's just reinforcing the bias that's inherent in the system. So you have to push into the other direction in order to get it to balance, and then once you get it to a certain point, then you can reevaluate and try to make it more
I,
centered, but you have to actually get to that point first.
yeah, I agree, but I think that the cultural narrative has reached such a level of propaganda that not only have we reached that point, we passed it. Um, and I know that's a very controversial view to assert, but I think that I can very cogently demonstrate it with common sense. One of my favorite shows, and I was just watching an episode today, All in the Family. Have you ever watched that show?
No,
Oh man,
I don't watch much TV. I just don't have time.
yeah, neither do I. I don't. It's just every now and then I get this inclination, and this is a show from back in the '70s. I think maybe even the '60s. It was back in the civil rights era. Archie Bunker was a particularly bigoted person, very racist. Lived next to a black man named George Jefferson, also racist, but on the other end of the spectrum. And it was just a daily witty banter between a white racist and a black racist, and a wife that he treated like she was stupid even though she knew way more than he did and was way wiser. And the same thing on Jefferson's side. His wife, he treated her like she was stupid even though like she always had the wisest things to say. And it was just a wonderful exercise in irony. We can't have shows like that today, though. Why is that? I
I
mean, I
would,
have. Oh, go ahead.
I would say it's because the younger generation has grown up and said we don't want to see bullshit like that because it's crap, it's bigoted, it's hurtful, it's mean, and we don't have to tolerate it, and we don't want to see it.
See, and that's where I couldn't disagree more, because I don't see that as being crap or hateful or bigoted. What I see it as being honesty about what's really going on inside of people, and us having that discussion about it and working through it rather than sweeping it under the rug and pretending it doesn't exist.
Right. Well, sweeping it under the rug would be trying to destroy the negatives and any records of those shows existing in the first place. Like, I still like to recommend people watch old movies like Blazing Saddles or Hear No Evil, See No Evil, and other things that have a lot of racial humor and stuff. Because, one, they're funny, but you also have to preface it that it's, also an indication of the times. And there's nothing wrong with having those, but that doesn't mean we need to continue producing stuff like that. At that time when it was produced, it may have been top of the line or progressive even at times, but today it certainly wouldn't be.
I don't know. I think there's a big illusion being propagated that somehow we've grown past the civil rights movement, and I
We
think that
definitely have not grown past the civil rights movement. It's still very much a problem.
Okay, we agree on that. But one of the problems is dialogue is being shut down. And what you were talking about before, how you think that this generation is saying that, well, we don't have to put up with this bullshit. We don't want to be subjected to it. That's just code word for saying we don't want to hear your opinion. We know we're right, and we're not going to listen to you, and we're going to march on. And the problem with that monolithic of an ideology is that you can get caught up in a movement that has all of your interests in that moment, but the movement might be about something that's other than what you really think it is. Just because your interests are associated with it doesn't mean that it's actually the same. And there needs to be that openness to oppose things, that openness to discuss how, I might agree with you, I might disagree with you, I might be in doubt. Here's the crazy thing. Try telling your average Canadian, I'm not a feminist. You don't have to say you're an anti-feminist, just say, I'm not a feminist, and watch what the hate you get. There is an ideology sweeping the Western society that's all about either you agree or you're the enemy. You're the heathen. It's almost like a reaction to Christian fundamentalism. It's like the same thing in negative. And it's very frightening for people like me who don't take one side or the other. I see myself as just a stopgap who's like, well, both sides have valid points and we need to discuss this. And both sides are bitching at me saying, you're a heretic, you're a bigot. Where is the discussion about these things?
There is definitely some truth to what you say there. Discussions certainly do need to happen. There are, although I haven't personally ran into them myself, there are people on both sides that are rather extreme. But I think in both cases, those are rather just a minority that happen to be very vocal or very visible. But that doesn't mean that either side is wrong or right. But these are definitely issues to deal with. But that's not really the point of my being on the show today. So I'd rather move into something that's more transgender related.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, I've reviewed your most recent video, specifically the last 10 minutes or so of it, so there was a couple of things that I wanted to talk about in terms of that. You were talking about homosexuality and things like that. Would you mind discussing that some?
No, absolutely. Let's go ahead.
Okay. Let's see. First, you made a point of saying, let me see if I have this right, homosexual men are estranged from their fathers, as one of your two things that happen with homosexual men.
They tend to be. I don't want to be. I don't want to be. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not trying to say that it has to be that. I'm not trying to make a definite rule. It's just it's the tendency.
Right, and I'll quote you here, also a weak-willed woman and an overbearing man. And once again, I understand you're generalizing it,
Right.
but at the same time, there's a couple things to this. You're drawing a causality where it's really just anecdotal at best. There is a lot to suggest that homosexual children will be abused by their parents and or their fathers.
I get what look, if you don't mind me jumping in. I get what you're saying, that a kid with sugar in his veins is going to elicit a bit of rage from his father. I took that into account and I investigated that claim. And where this started was a book by Tim LaHaye. Now, I'm not going to say that Tim LaHaye is an authority that anyone should ever take seriously, okay? I'm not advocating Tim LaHaye. All I'm saying is that he gave me a line of reasoning that got me thinking in his book, what everyone needs to know about homosexuality but doesn't want to. That was the book, and that's where I first was introduced to that causal link that you just mentioned.
Right.
So subsequently, I don't think that it's necessarily a causal link. I think that it is, I can't think of the technical term, it's an association. It's something that tends to run concurrent with a trend. So I don't really think that in modern American men there's this tendency to abuse their effeminate children. Maybe 30 or 40, 50 years ago, that could have been a valid argument. Even then, it would be a slippery slope fallacy, in my opinion. But I think today, the environment is so friendly to this idea, and there's been no change in the actual demographics.
Well,
So
I can tell you that while it would be nice if that were true, it just isn't the case. And not to say that it's not better than it was, but it definitely isn't anywhere near that. I mean, just 2 weeks ago, I had a high school student who was darn near afraid, but had to tell me because I was out there championing trans rights for something else. And I mean, he just barely whispered to me that he was gay, and he was scared to tell me, even though he knew I was a friend. And I spent 5 minutes just holding him while he wept in my arms because he was so scared of everything that he deals with. And this is a high school student today, and that's what it's like for a lot of people. This is not a solo incident. This is, something
right,
that's
and
pervasive.
there's some white girls that'll bring a black boy home and the father will flip out. That doesn't
Mm-hmm.
mean that that's endemic. It just means that it happens. I mean, the United States is 300 million strong right now. You're going
Mm-hmm.
to find everything in that demographic.
Well, yes, you will find everything, but it's not something that is just an isolated incident either. Um, it's something that we experience quite a bit, and I understand you wouldn't yourself necessarily know it because you're not part of the group, and so you wouldn't necessarily be paying attention to it. So it's understandable
You,
that you would be
you, you may be jumping to conclusions.
you may have some friends and all, but it's not as personal to you, so you're not as likely to be as familiar with things, maybe in your local area, perhaps in others.
I don't know.
Um,
I got a lot of shit when I started wearing makeup.
I can imagine so. So you've had at least a small taste of it,
I'm not trying to compare it with your experience, okay? All I'm
of course.
saying is that there
Hmm.
are small overlaps, you know?
Of
I,
course,
and
there is
I've
overlap.
always been one of those guys who tends to be on the outside looking in anyway. Um, if it wasn't for the internet, nobody would give a shit about anything I have to say. That's really all it comes down to. The internet is the only place that has that I have their ear. As far as real life goes, yeah, maybe I got a circle of 20 or 30 of people who actually give a shit about anything I have to say. Hardly a cult leader by any stretch of the imagination. But all I'm trying to say is I'm just a regular guy trying to go about my life, seeing these things working out before me, and it seems like all of the ideologues and the people who are running the narrative are driving this idea that doesn't really seem to be fleshing out in real life. Like, I hear what you're saying about uh, trans people being abused for the bathrooms that they use, but what I'm not hearing is like a viable solution that doesn't create more problems than what it solves. And I
Well,
just
like
so go ahead.
specifically in terms of the bathrooms, the problem is that these conservatives are making it a problem. They are the problem by making a big fuss about it. The fuss
No,
is the
no, wait, wait,
problem.
wait, 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 hold on a second. Hold on a second. Conservatives did not bring this issue to light. This was not a conservative. Like, I'm not conservative. I'm not Republican. I'm apolitical. But I want to be very clear that this was brought to the table by progressives and liberals. This issue was orchestrated by the left.
I would disagree with you. We've been fighting bathroom bills for many years, even though it's only recently got a lot of media attention. It's something that in various locales we've been fighting for years, literally. I know Zinnia Jones in particular has gone on her videos all the way back to, I think her earliest one was 2012, talking about it then. This is not a new thing, and it's not something, you know, the reason why we have brought it into the areas that we brought it into is specifically because of these other religious conservatives that are trying to prevent us from accessing bathrooms that are appropriate for us.
Okay, so this is where we can agree. Now, I think that we both basically said the same thing, just from two different perspectives. So I can see that. I can see how it, you know, the issue has been an undercurrent, but I can see how also, like what I said, like you just admitted, was really brought into the forefront by the left. However, it wasn't. You feel?
No, I would disagree, and it was brought into the forefront because those same conservatives lost their battle against gay marriage last year, and they've now found a new target to draw their energies at. And that's the real reason why it's in the big news now, is because they can't fight that anymore. So they have to fight something because they don't agree with any of this. So they've just picked the next target. And even once we get through and win in court, they'll just find somebody else after us. And I have no idea who that'll be, but I really feel bad for them.
Most of the time, dude, seriously, most of the time I would agree with you. What you're saying is actually true. It's the same both for social justice warriors and Tea Partiers. It really is about people who have a battle mindset, that they always need a cause because their lives are so boring that they need something to live for. So I really do. I see that. I get that. I hope you see it on your side as well, too, though. But this particular issue, where I started, I think the post where we actually first coincided was when I said, I don't care what the law says. When my wife and daughter are using the bathroom, I'll just stand outside it and make sure that they have their privacy. The way this works out in real life is if some dude like you came to go into the bathroom, I'd be like, hey, and I wouldn't be an asshole about it. I'd be like, hey, do me a favor. Just 2 minutes is all I ask. Just 2 minutes. Just wait for my daughter and my wife to get done in there. They'll come out, and then you can have it all to yourself. I'd be really polite about it. But I think that's more than reasonable to ask. No woman wants to be in that space with someone with external plumbing. Can you appreciate that?
If a black woman were to walk up and you said the same thing to them, would you think that would be okay?
That's false equivocation, and that's so
really
insufferable. No, it is. Well, it is because you're talking about. Wait. Hold on a second. You're talking about a psychological condition versus a genetic condition.
No, that's the thing. It's not a psychological condition.
You're going to equivocate ethnicity to a person's gender identity?
Yes, that's actually been firmly founded in the sciences. There's a whole bunch of things, especially in the last few years.
Melina, come on. You can at least admit that it's contested. You can at least admit that it's contested. You can't just say that it's settled.
I'm not going to say it's completely settled, if only because there is a lot more going on, but it is absolutely conclusive in that every single professional organization that's legitimate, which I'm not including things like the Christian right that have a few.
Of course not.
I'm not.
Of course they're illegitimate.
I have to acknowledge their existence, but every single other one, all are in agreement, unanimously.
That's just not true.
It is true. It's in the standards of care. I can link to you.
The standards of care is not unanimous. That's a majority. There's a big difference between a majority of peer-reviewed material and the unanimity. It's not unanimous. This is an ongoing debate, and it is a valid debate. The only reason why it's become this one-sided is because of the political pressure behind it. It's not. If you seriously.
Here, let me relate to you one particular article that I can forward to you of research that came out just last year. And there's more research that corroborates it in other places. And what they found is that when the baby is developing in the womb, the presence of certain hormones at specific times, not at the same time, but at specific different times, actually causes the development of both the physical sex as well as the gender identity and the sexual orientation. Those are three different things at three different times. And so literally, right, but we are born this way. So it's not, but you know, it is part of our being. It is something that we are, and we're trying to fix things that don't line up, but at the same time, it is not a psychological condition. It is not a disease.
I think we're crossing the line into semantics at this point, and I own a lot of responsibility for that, and I'm actually learning as we speak. I'm realizing how I have added to the ambiguity of this issue rather than adding to the clarity of it. In my statements, calling trans everything various levels of mental disorders, I think what was lost in translation is my assertion that we're all fucked up. That we're all skewed to a varying degree, and this is just one particular form of being skewed, but that the epistemological, the ideal version of the human is not subject to these departures from the norm. Does that make any sense?
I think I hear what you're saying, but I would have to say that you're wrong, that it is actually part of normalcy. I mean, if you were to look at the other animals in the animal kingdom, in particular, I'm thinking of rams, for instance.
Let me clarify. Just very, very briefly, let me clarify. When I say normative, I don't mean the average. What I mean is formal. I can't get outside of the philosophical language. I got to boil this down. What I'm talking about is when you have an idea, okay, of a beer. Okay, I have a beer here. When I say beer, what I mean is something that is fermented with barley and hops and water, right? That's a definition of a beer. Well, if you pick up a bottle of Smirnoff Ice, it says flavored beer, and that's not fermented with barley and hops. So both of them are beers, but this one is an actual closer representation of what a real definition of a beer is, as opposed to this facsimile. And that's okay. Go ahead.
All right. So what it is here is you're using labels, which I don't have a problem with labels themselves.
We're kind of subject to them because I was brought into this with labels.
Right. I have no problem with labels. I actually like labels, but there are problems with labels, but that's not where I'm going with this. What it is that labels are culturally defined, and those definitions change with the culture. So even if you can label something and define it this one way, in another generation or two, they may change the way that they perceive that label.
I couldn't possibly agree more. Absolutely. I think I got into some arguments with people. Like if you look down through my profile pictures on my Facebook account, you'll see some that you look down the comments. Like there's this one picture where everyone was telling me I looked like a girl, and I didn't think there was anything feminine about me. I had long hair, no facial hair, and I had eyeliner on that I felt like it was metal as fuck, okay? I just thought that I was just being hardcore. And like 4 or 5 different... Excuse me, what?
Clockwork Orange?
Somewhat like that, yes, absolutely. Yeah, I was in my
Mhm.
own element, and
Mhm.
several people chimed in saying I look like a girl, and I was like, what? What are you talking about? And they're like, well, you're wearing makeup. I'm like, go ahead and tell that to the Apaches or to the Celts or anyone else who wore war paint into battle. I mean, seriously, like makeup is feminine? It's like we really don't get a grasp on these cultural influences. So I will take the first step in saying how I define femininity and masculinity is thus. I think that we are a binary species, that our social dynamic has evolved so that one is basically the brain and the other is basically the body. And if we understand how the brain and body works, then we begin to understand how the brain doesn't do all the thinking. The brain doesn't do all the decision making. Um, the bacteria in our gut actually has a lot to do with that stuff. The chemicals that they release and the hormones that affect us and how they drive us, our heart and all of our organs, they interact with the brain in such a way that we're learning. Whereas before we used to think that the brain basically directed all of the body's functions, we're learning that it's actually a very mutual interchange between the brain and the body. It's a constant conversation between the two. And like for musicians who play guitar, their hands, the nerves in their hands, actually retain the memory of the chords, not their cerebral cortex. This is a revolutionary discovery. And the reason why I relate this to gender is because I see this as how we are built as a species. That there is a leading role and a supporting role, and neither is bigger or better than the other, that both are exceptionally necessary. And without one, you can't have the other. And if you want to talk about being outside of that paradigm, that's perfectly acceptable. I have no problem with that. But
Um,
the paradigm abides.
I would disagree at the very least with, and maybe it's just a misunderstanding what you're trying to communicate, the primary role and the supporting role. I mean, that very much sounds like patriarchy to me. Is that not what
It
you're
is. It
suggesting?
is. I'm not gonna
Okay.
sugarcoat it. It
And
is.
okay, but there have been societies in our history that were matriarchal in nature,
Oh,
and so
primarily the Sioux Nation, and it worked great, and I'm all for that too.
and I would suggest that that right there is an easy proof that at least the concept of primary and supportive in terms of gender roles really isn't valid. Now, that's not to say that
Nope.
they don't exist, but that doesn't also mean that they have to be the way that it is.
There's a reason I brought the Oglala Sioux into this, because the Sioux Nation, though they were a matriarchy, the matriarchy functioned as still the feminine was the supporting role, the masculine was the primary role, in that the braves procured their food, they fought the wars, and tended to the basic needs, whereas the females of the society were more involved in the decision making and figuring out. But you see what I mean by
So, well,
primary and supportive.
in
It doesn't
in
necessarily
doing
mean
that,
controlling. I'm not bringing control into the issue. I'm just bringing
right.
pragmatic into the issue.
Well, but also think a little bit more about what you're saying there. You're placing a value judgments on the activities that the men have as being more valuable than the activities that the women
No,
have.
no, I just said the exact
But
opposite. I said you didn't have one without the other. How would you possibly say that one's more valuable like that? That's a
by
total
by saying
misunderstanding.
that they're primary
No,
versus
primary and
supportive.
secondary means that they take the head. It means that they're at the front of it. It doesn't mean that they're more valuable. Look, I mean, you can say that having clothing is primary as to washing, but if you don't wash, you're going to get infections and die. So, I mean, I know, bad example, but
Maybe.
the point is just because you can recognize one thing as primary and another thing as a supporting role does not mean that one is better than the other. We're talking about complementarianism here.
And there's nothing wrong with having relationships on the smaller local individual levels, but attempting to enforce that onto everyone, that's where the problems come.
Would I ever advocate such a thing?
No, I'm sure you wouldn't, but there are people that are trying to, and that's part of my problems.
Well, and they're never going to succeed. I mean, really, one of the biggest problems is that government's involved in relationships in the first place. This is the reason why on my Facebook profile it says that me and Michelle are in a relationship and not married. We're married, you know. We're not going anywhere. We're together for life. We just don't feel the need to involve the government in our relationship.
And I've heard that before, and there's a lot to that, and we could talk about that later. But yeah, and I get that, but it's still when there are people out there in places of power that are trying to enforce these roles onto the people under their power. I mean, I think it was one of the guys in North Carolina when he was talking about HB2 said, we need to fight to keep our state straight. I mean, that's an example of a politician working to enforce the roles that he's defined onto those that he thinks they need to be placed onto. And therein lies the problem. There are a lot of these people.
I agree with the motivation. I don't agree with the actual substance of the bill. I don't see a problem with the bill itself, but the people that were primary and sponsoring the bill had insidious motivations, and they are looking to win a battle of attrition, not a definitive victory one day. So, of course, I understand your concern there, and it's valid. I'm not going to deny that. However, what I will say is that the issue of the bill itself, what it raises, is also valid. And that's
the thing. The issue they are raising in that is the idea that not doing that would somehow, or at least this is the claims they make, that not putting forth bills like that would somehow allow perverts to pretend to be trans women and therefore go into bathrooms and other stuff uncontested. The problem there is that doesn't happen.
Well, it does, but it's nuanced. This is where we get to really pick things apart a bit and spend a little time investigating this. Now, I agree with you that your average trans person just wants to take a piss. Okay? I absolutely agree with you there. However, it is very documented that it is very common for men to dress up as women, to go into female bathrooms, put phones underneath the stalls, take pictures of them. Okay, so...
Okay, Eric, let me respond to that.
If you finish my spiel, I'm not going to take more than 30 seconds.
Okay.
So, we have two equal principles here that are never going to be solved. What do we want to do? Open the door to prevent, like, anyone from actually having a problem with this? Because that's what I see happening, is if I stand outside of a bathroom and politely, mind you, I'm saying politely ask someone to wait just 1 minute while my daughter gets done. Please, just give me 1 minute, that's all I'm asking. They want to criminalize that act. Do you think that's okay?
All right. Well, can I come back to that?
And I know you want to relate it to being black.
I want to go to no. I want to come back to that, but I want to respond to the one thing about the men going into restrooms and stuff.
Okay. Fair enough. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
That, while it has happened, it is not common. It is very rare. Now there have been cases where men have done things without bathrooms, but there's been very, very, very few of any putting on a wig and a dress or anything to accomplish that. To my knowledge, I've only found in this country 4 instances of that in the last 5 years.
Oh, no.
But there would have to...
Whoa. You had a point up until there.
Mm-hmm.
That it's not the norm. It doesn't happen all the time. but only 4 instances in the past 10 years. No, 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 no. I
That's
posted a
right.
video that showed
Yeah, I saw
over.
that. I saw that video, and I'm going to guess that you didn't research any of the people in there. That video that you posted is about 25 minutes long, and I spent about 4 hours dissecting it, going into every single individual case in there. And bathrooms were only involved in any way, shape, or form in about 5 of the, I think it was about 25 people that were in there. And in at least one case in particular, what they're suggesting in the video is a complete opposite of what actually happened, and I'll relate it. There was this there were some kids that claimed that there was a trans woman parading around exposing themselves in a sauna and stuff like that. Perhaps you recall that one. And what it was that these girls, underage girls, went into an adult area only and peered through glass, through a haze, into what was relatively private area where there was a trans woman with a cisgender woman having a sauna together. And that was it. But then they claimed to be a victim of exposure when in fact those very same girls were actually guilty of voyeurism. And so the whole thing is completely made up.
No,
And
you
that's
can't
just
say
one
"and so."
example.
That's the misuse of the term "and so." I admit that what you just related was contrivance, but you're talking about a singular instance and a
Right, and
very
as I
long video.
said, I went through every single one of all those things in there, and the entire video
And
is very
I appreciate
tenuous,
the point that you're
and
making,
it's
and
over.
what I will concede to you is that the video was definitely biased and that it was trying to make a point.
Right, and it
And it's sad
failed
that that
if
one
you
that
research it.
sorry, what was that?
It failed if you bother to research the true history of all the different ones and relate it to the premise of the video in the first place.
I don't think it failed so much as it gave a vulnerability to dissect it. I think that if you're unbiased in it, you can see both the point that it makes and how they go beyond that in trying to
Well,
really like send it home. But that
right. Well, most of the cases, the far majority of all the cases listed in that video, were just showing that there were either trans women or men that were cross-dressers or men that had some sort of a fetish but weren't necessarily cross-dressers, and that these were all people that have done bad things. And in the vast majority of all those, there wasn't a bathroom involved in any way, shape, or form. You know, several of them had to do with
so
murder and all sorts of other things. And that's not to
okay.
say that there aren't trans women that have done bad things. There just haven't been any trans women that have done bad things in the bathroom. There have been
So
0
okay.
cases of trans
I'll
women assaulting anyone in a bathroom. And I can relate from personal experience where I'm at. I'm in Florida, and I'm in a county and a city that has had gender identity protections on their ordinances since 2008.
well, of
And they've
course I'm going to
never,
agree
not
with you.
once, had a problem.
Of course, I'm going to agree with you that there's 0 incidents of trans women attacking other women because they're not faking it. What we're talking about is
Mm-hmm.
people faking it.
Right, and that, while on the surface, sounds like a legitimate
It
worry. The
does
issue is,
happen.
well, that's the thing, is it doesn't.
Yes, it
I
does.
mean, like I
I've
said,
experienced it in my own personal life myself. I
it
know that's
it would
anecdotal.
have to happen to the degree of more than a couple dozen every
What?
year,
I mean,
and
seriously, come
that
on. We can be reasonable about this and say
mhm.
that there's nothing wrong with a woman who has a vagina wanting to be in a space to relieve herself where there's nobody else around that has a penis. I don't see what's so unreasonable about that.
Well, if you know what the genitals are of the person in the stall next to you, you're doing something wrong.
Oh, you're not. That's sidestepping. Come on.
Well,
Seriously.
how else would you really know? I mean, these
It's
bills
not
are
about
designed to
knowing.
attack trans women.
It's Melina. It's not about knowing. It's about the idea of security. And look, I guarantee you, 3/4 of the women who are watching this, listening to this conversation right now, they'll know what I'm talking about, and that other quarter will only object because of ideology. The fact is, the penis is an intimidation. And I don't know why. I don't fully understand this. I'm not trying to say that I fully understand it or have any understanding of why that is. But the fact is women, there's something about a penis. There's something about the male genitalia. And they want that security. It's not about the reality. It's about the conception of, well, I'm safe here, and I know that there's no penises around. It sounds silly, okay? I hear myself talking, and I hear how silly it sounds, but it's true. It's reality. It's like, what's so wrong with a biological female safe space? I'm not talking about legislation, by the way.
Because
I'm
it's
against
not a safe
legislation.
space. It's a public bathroom. Okay, you have a right to be safe in a bathroom, whichever bathroom that happens to be. Sure,
And
it's
you have
not
a right to not be recorded, right?
in a bathroom, absolutely. And those are illegal, and those that have done that have been dealt with on the legal circuit.
Right,
That doesn't mean
So
that
what
you
we're
can
talking about is
therefore
not
disenfranchise.
okay. So what we're talking about is not a fully public space like you're trying to imply that it is. What we're talking about is it is a public space with limitations because it is a safe haven. It is a place
I would
where
never claim that a bathroom in a public area is a safe haven, although that would be nice if it was. It's not.
isn't that what we're stretching for?
We can stretch for that,
Well, isn't that what
but
you're
that doesn't
trying
mean
to
you can.
get by allowing trans women into females' bathrooms? Isn't that really what you're trying to get? Is that safe haven?
We're trying to go to the bathroom, and there are people that are trying to give us the choice of either not using the public bathroom or outing ourselves so
Oh,
that
geez. Look, I'll stand guard outside the bathroom while you use it.
you
Okay? I
will,
would do
but there
that.
are others
No,
that
there's
won't.
tons of guys like me. Like the majority of men. Majority of men out there would say the same thing.
I would disagree with you there, although that would be nice if it was true. But it still doesn't change the fact that if you put us into a position of choosing to either go into the women's room and break the law or go into the men's room and out ourselves, there may be a safety factor, and maybe individuals wouldn't be worried about that, but there's still that otherness, that making us to be different. It's causing us to expose ourselves, our identities, and our personal integrities, and everything to be seen, and it puts a target on our back. It makes us uncomfortable, and it's not a good experience.
So, but you're giving your concerns a disproportionate significance to the concerns of the majority. You're saying your minority concern outweighs the majority concern.
I'm saying the majority concern, which is not actually the majority concern, it's just a significant section that's being heard, is way overblown because it's been regularly proven on so many people that have gone and researched and talked to police departments, multiple police departments of different counties, different states, all across the nation, and all of the police departments that have had these gender ordinances that protect transgender people, none of them have reported any problems of anybody abusing those laws. Not once.
That's
ever.
fine. I'm not taking a pragmatic approach, so that really has nothing to do with what I'm saying.
The issue is that these concerns are made-up hyperbole.
Right, but you're jousting at windmills. Mine's a principled concern, not a pragmatic one. You keep citing pragmatic evidence, and I don't care about that. What I'm talking about is the principle of the matter, that a woman shouldn't have to be subjected to that indignity.
What is it they would be subjected to?
You don't understand. That's the thing. You don't understand. They do. And they don't need you to understand, they just need you to respect it. I don't understand what's so hard about that.
Well, I happen to know a lot of women that would be on my side in this.
And I guarantee you I can give you 10 to your every one.
I'm pretty darn sure you would not be able to. Women are actually some of the more supportive people in our movement.
No, no, you don't get it, dude.
Mhm.
You don't get it. Girls just yell louder. You don't understand. Conservative girls keep their mouths shut because they don't care to get involved in the narrative.
I would
No, no,
disagree.
the
The
GLBT.
conservative girls are the ones that are talking about it.
Wow, okay. Growing up out in the sticks, I don't know what your upbringing is, all
Okay.
right?
Okay,
But
I currently live in the sticks, but I grew up in a place that's in the city. But let's think about this further. Trans women going into bathrooms, regardless of whichever room it is, are regularly confronted with harassment, abuse, rape, assault, and even murder. And to a proportionate degree, cis women do not have that. So
I
our
would have to
safety
digest
is
that for a minute. But the first part of what you said, I will agree with, and that's not okay. And yeah, there's a need to address that. I agree with that. As far as the second part, that cis women don't have to deal with that.
okay. I would like to address briefly the concept that you have that women have a problem with penises. And I don't think that's what it is. They have a problem with men that do bad things, and men that do bad things happen to have a penis. It's
Well,
not about
yeah,
the
it's a
penis.
represent.
It's about,
We
right,
agree.
it's
We
not
agree.
about the penis. It's about the men, the cisgender men that do bad things.
It's not just cisgender men, but
It
yeah,
is just
no, it's
cisgender men
not just
because
cis.
there's never been a case of a transgender female assigned male at birth that has done those things in the bathroom. And you yourself agreed to that.
I didn't agree to that. I said it wasn't the majority. It wasn't the norm. It doesn't tend to
There's
happen.
never been a case of a trans woman committing sexual assault in a bathroom in this country.
Statistically speaking, that can't be true. I mean, that's just,
I
I'm
mean,
not.
certainly at some point in time it'll probably happen, but how many, it's not a matter of
Look,
just
I get the
one.
point you're making. I'm not arguing
Mhm.
like trying to say that it's a tendency. What I'm trying to say is like you saying that never ever ever. That stretches the lines of
At the moment, that's the case.
I.
And even if it was one or four or even seven,
That's what I'm
I
saying.
mean,
That's a level of rhetoric that isn't necessary. I think we can agree that it's highly unlikely. We can agree
okay,
on that.
okay, and so when the statistics show that the fear that they're fearing doesn't apply, why are you fighting it?
I keep trying to explain it to you. You keep trying to take these pragmatic routes, and I keep trying to explain to you I have no pragmatic objection. My objection is principled. It's because a woman should not be subjected to that indignity. That she should
Okay.
have her own private space apart from that interference,
Does
apart
she
from
have that own private space at the home that she lives at with her boyfriend or husband or guests that come over?
absolutely. She shuts the door and they're not in there.
Right, and when you go into the public bathroom, you go into the stall and you shut
Nah,
the
you
door and
can
the
see
same
through the
thing.
cracks. I mean,
Well,
seriously.
then why don't you complain about the privacy of the stalls in the bathrooms instead of who's using the ones to it?
Look, if we want a real solution, that's really the way to go about it, is individual unisex bathrooms, and I have no problem with that. What I have a problem with is people wanting to legislate to say it's illegal to give women a safe space. I have no
Well,
problem with unisex bathrooms. I have no
once
problem.
again,
Wait, hold on, Melina. I have no problem with employers making three different bathrooms, or even having one bathroom, or having two bathrooms and saying, you know what? Whatever you identify. What's that boycott? Target? Is it
Target.
Target?
Yeah.
I think the boycott is legitimate. I also think that the government has no business getting involved in it. That Target made their business choice and that the market is responding. And that's all perfectly legitimate. I think it would be the
Mhm.
worst thing in the world for a state to get involved and to say Target needs to segregate their bathrooms.
Okay,
That would
but
be
that's what the government
horrible.
is doing. That's what the government is doing, or
That's not
trying to
that's
do
not
in
what
various
that's
different
not what
ways.
the North Carolina law was about.
They didn't. They did leave opening for businesses to be able to do that, but there have
We
been other bills that have like I
all
believe it
right,
was
and
Oxford,
I'm against
Alabama,
those, and
specifically.
we're agreed on that. I'm against those.
Okay, but even so, there's still the matter of the government's public buildings, of public restrooms in the government spaces.
Unisex.
While that would be a good option, it is not a reality that we are capable of seeing within the next even 10 years. I would be surprised if we went
No
full force in
bullshit.
trying.
Most
I
of
don't think.
Maine facilities are unisex. I mean, and Maine's one of the most backwoods states in the friggin' nation. Seriously, there's no problem with making them all unisex. The thing with me is I tire of the argument. So it's like at the end of the day, I'm
Okay.
like,
Well,
it's too
I,
complicated.
I'm,
Let's
I'm,
just
I'm a little confused at the moment because right now you're arguing for unisex bathrooms, but a moment ago you were arguing against having somebody that wasn't born biologically female in the stall next to your wife or girlfriend. I mean,
right
connect
because
this.
I'm connecting it because we're talking about the difference between a woman's room and a unisex room.
Okay, so you want to make a point of saying that trans women are not women.
I want to say that bathrooms are about your plumbing, not about your psychology.
Okay, so when a trans woman has surgeries but doesn't bother to do anything on the. I mean, how would you even know? Once again, it comes back to that. How would you regulate such a thing?
Isn't that what I've been saying all along?
Well,
It's
but
a
you're advocating for the women in your life to have the right to not be exposed to having somebody with such and such next to them in the stall, and yet you'd have to have a way to find out that in the first place. I mean,
no, not at
where does
all.
it go?
That's overcomplicated. That's violation of Occam's razor. All that really needs to be necessary. Okay, number one, I'm against any legislation that involves this. Okay, I'm largely an anarchist. I don't believe in legislation as solving these problems. I believe that business owners have a right to administrate their facilities as they see fit. But me, if I was a business owner, the way that I would negotiate it is I would just have individual unisex bathrooms, not a mass unisexual bathroom.
Well, why not?
Individual.
Well, they do, right, but that's what they do in Europe. I mean, I was talking to somebody just 2 weeks ago that
Dude,
had
have
just
you
come
ever
back
been to
from
Europe?
France. I have not, but I talked
I
to somebody
have.
just 2 weeks.
I have.
And
When I was 15 years old, I was not allowed to go into the larger video store. However, I was left to sit in the foyer where their porn was. That's how they operate in Europe. This is
mm,
Germany, by the way,
mm,
Heidelberg. And this is
mm.
rather common. They had cigarette machines on the street corners.
How
I
does that
mean,
relate to the bathrooms? I mean, I
it
talked to
doesn't at
somebody
all.
just
Europe doesn't relate to
okay.
the United States at all. I don't know why
We're
you brought it into
talking
the conversation.
well because bathrooms are a universal human need. Every human has to be able to use a bathroom of some form, even if it's a ditch outside back from 500 years ago. Every human has to be able to pee. And in France,
Dude,
specifically,
they
a friend I
wipe
was
with their
talking to.
hands in the Middle East. You're trying to make a universal principle that isn't universal. They wipe with the Bedouins wipe with their fucking left hand,
Okay,
and they rub it
that's
in the sand afterwards.
right. Okay, that's not what I'm talking about here. We're talking about sharing bathroom space. Okay,
Right, their bathroom space is the backwoods. or the back
Okay,
desert,
and in
whatever it
some
was.
areas that's certainly the case, but let me
It's
finish
not a
with my
universal. That's what I'm trying to establish to you. It's not a universal that we're making this up as we go along. It's a cultural thing. It's
okay.
a
Well,
okay.
if it's a cultural thing, why can't we change that culture? Is my
We
point.
can. I'm one of those guys who we're actually in agreement right now that it is contrived. And I'm saying that my way is more beneficial than what I understand of your way. And
Well, I'm that. If I were to understand your point there, I would say that that's because you're aiming for a place that would be nice to end up, whereas I'm trying to deal with the reality of what currently exists.
yeah, that's valid.
Okay. Now, I would like to finish my example. I was talking to a friend just 2 weeks ago, a little over 2 weeks ago, who had recently come back from France and went to a gym, and they had a locker room. And the locker rooms, they didn't have gendered locker rooms. They had this big area where everybody went to, and they had changing stalls, and they had showers, and they had bathrooms, and it was all just one big central place that had things branched out. And that's what it's like over there. And they don't have these problems that the conservatives are claiming are a problem of men pretend. They don't have to pretend over there because they're already together anyway. It's just not an issue. But the conservatives want it to be an issue. They're making an issue. In fact, by talking about it, they're trying really hard to encourage someone to make it an issue, to take it upon themselves to do these horrible things.
Well, you're almost right. It's not the conservatives that are doing it. It's other people. Conservatives, by nature, tend to keep to themselves until they're infringed upon. So your idea of conservatives, I don't know where you get it from, but
When
it's.
I say that, I'm usually specifically referring to Republicans, if that helps to narrow it
I
down a bit.
suspect that you're specifically referring to Christians.
Usually that would be the case, truthfully, but that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah, and Christians only make up maybe like 2/3 of conservatives. There's a huge, huge segment of conservatives that absolutely reject those things that you say that you get from conservatives. So, if you think that George Bush Jr. is a conservative, then you don't understand conservatism. He was a liberal Republican. No.
I would have to disagree strongly on that. In fact, I go to the point of saying that Hillary Clinton is actually a conservative. If you look at the history and look at the world and compare it, she's actually conservative. Everybody else has moved so far to the right. But that's politics, and that's not what we're really talking about here.
Ah, what the what? Hillary Clinton's. All right, this is a
If you want
first for our broadcast. You have made me fucking speechless. Holy mother of fuck.
If you'd like to talk about that another time, we certainly could. But admittedly, it has been an hour at this point. So do you want to wrap it up?
Okay. That was quite a statement. That's hard. That. Wow. Because like I'm way more. Okay. You've made a lot of good points. And I think it has been a good conversation, like I knew it would be. And I hope that you can spend some time considering the concerns that I raised from my perspective and how I'm not looking to judge, belittle, or relegate you in any way outside of the process. Um, I just feel like there's nothing wrong with us having certain arbitrary social rules that make us comfortable as a people. And that's where I stand, and we can continue to have a debate and discussion about it. I'm sorry, I'm really distracted about the Hillary comment. That was just, wow. So anyway, You, of all the people I have ever talked to online, no one has ever thrown me like you just did. Like, I am like the king of staying on topic, even through my rabbit trails, and wow. So anyway, I'm just, um, just, her and Trump are really good friends too, by the way. But
Yeah, I do know that.
maybe you should give the outro. You tell me what your conclusion is.
I've never given an outro before, but I appreciate having me on, and it's been a delightful conversation. I found you to be rather interesting, so I appreciate that in general. And maybe next time we could talk about it again.
I'd like to
On
have
and
another
on.
conversation, very much so.
Sure.
All right,
If
well,
anybody would like to follow me or learn about me, you can find me on Twitter at Melina, Melina, Rayna, Rayna. You can also find me through Facebook the same way. Locally, I also am part of a local group called Trans Affairs in Gainesville. You can find us there and follow my activities.
well, there we go. And of course, I don't give a shit who follows me because I hate everybody. But I'm just kidding. I really have enjoyed this conversation a lot, and I hope that we can have another one soon to continue this on, because I think what we really need as a people, as a planet, is we need to be in dialogue with one another, because we all have our own given interests, and we tend to disregard everyone else. And like, libertarians are especially notorious with this, but liberals do it with much less impunity. So I think that, like, conversations about the nature of how we interact with each other and the roles that we play are super, like, important. And we're so afraid of offending one another that we avoid talking about these things honestly, and that's bullshit. You know, we gotta have a set of balls about us. Well, you don't, but I'm just kidding. I'm just messing with you. But regardless,
We're never going to come up with good solutions if we don't talk.
exactly. That's what I'm trying to say. And it's like, we can agree to disagree as long as we, like, understand where each of us is coming from. Because I think empathy is really the biggest thing, isn't it? I mean, really, we want to know that the other person can feel what we're feeling. Isn't that what really matters?
It definitely matters a great deal.
So, in any case, I've very much enjoyed this conversation, and I appreciate you stepping out and putting yourself out there. I know that it's not easy sometimes, but you've definitely very much represented your side very well, and I do respect you, and I hope that we can continue this dialogue. But until then, I will draw this broadcast to a close. Thank you for joining us, and just remember, a vote for Trump is a vote against Hillary. I just can't stand her. I just hate her so much. But anyway, peace out, boy, girl, trans scouts. We'll catch you on the flip side. End broadcast now.